Are you ready to manage your work and personal world better to live a more fulfilling, productive life? Then you've come to the right place. Welcome to ProductivityCast, the weekly show about all things productivity. Here are your hosts, Ray Sidney Smith and Augusto Pinaud.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Ray Sidney Smith and
Augusto Pinaud. Good morning.
Good morning. How's it going? This is ProductivityCast, the weekly show about all things personal productivity. And today on this show, we are going to be talking about resistance. There is probably nobody better to discuss resistance than the author that we'll be discussing and his book, which is Steven Pressfield and the War of Art. So, Augusto, tell us a little bit about Steven Pressfield. I know his Wikipedia biography, but I think you know him a little bit better in terms of the background and why this book. You brought up the topic, and you sort of have championed this topic, and so I'm curious about what really jumped out about Pressfield's background and what sort of sparked your interest in his work. And just as sort of a little bit of a background for folks before you get started, Augusto, is that Pressfield, at least at the time of recording, I think is 73 or 74 years old, and he is an American author. He's written both fiction and nonfiction and screenplays, and people probably most likely know him from The Legend of Badger Vance. That's probably his biggest, because it's turned into that, the 2000 film. As of recent, a couple last years, several years ago, he has started a publishing house called Black Irish Books, and he started that with his agent Sean Coyne, and so he has a small publishing house. But anyway, tell us a little bit more about Steven Pressfield and what makes this topic so near and dear to you, Augusto.
Pressfield, as you said, most people know who he is because of the first book he wrote that got into a movie, and that's sadly a lot of the reference for the people to know that is the movie more than that. That said, he has participated in other movies, even some of them that people really know, but he has a quite interesting story. When he wrote a book that I have no way to prove what I'm going to say, but I think he wrote The War of Art for himself, and as telling a story for what is the struggles to being a writer. And honestly, I don't think he thought he was going to have that much success. But
that's because he was, as he details in the book, he was homeless, living out of his car at the time he was writing The War of Art. So that's why he probably didn't think it was going to be much success.
Well, Pressfield right now enjoy a certain status as a writer. He published The Legend of Badger Vance. He has published some books on his history. Fiction history or historic fiction, if you like history and romance and World War II, really, I like them. So his books, even though some of them are fiction, are amazing on the content, on the historical facts that tied up with that fiction, to the point that really you can come and if you don't know enough about some of those stories, come and think that they have more reality than fiction. That is one of the things that actually make him amazing as a writer.
Yeah, actually, his second novel, Gates of Fire, is taught to the U.S. military, the Naval Academy, and at Quantico for Marines. This is not like second-class historical fiction. This is hardcore stuff.
Right. One of the things that make him really cool and really special as a writer is he has been able to show his humanity. It takes, at least on my experience, when you look at writers and famous people, you really find two kinds of them. The ones who are perfect and never struggle, okay, and it was expected that they were going to get there, and the ones who show you all the marks that they were led you in their way. I can tell you as a writer, I have published 11 books, and I wish to tell you the second one was easier than the first one, and the 11th was easier than the second one. And sadly, that's a lie. At least has been a lie for me. Every book comes with a struggle. I'm right now finishing a book that it's difficult. There is a point on writers, that's what I call the valley of despair, where everything is dark, mushy, everything that you kind of dislike. And the only way to finish that book is to grow through that valley of despair. And the work of art come to tell you Pressfield version of that. He talks to what he called the resistance. And the resistance, as he defined it, is that little thing, that little voice that tells you not to do it, that tells you all the reasons why you should not do it, and tell you all the reasons why you should quit. And when he published that book, I think it was around 2002, it was really the book on his own. It was the first time that somebody pinpoint that resistance and pinpoint the difference between what he called an amateur and a pro. When he'd make the distinction, the difference is not that the pro doesn't have this resistance. The difference is the pro do not stop because the resistance. And he make all the difference and even tell his own story of when he, as a writer, changed from being what he called an amateur writer to being a pro writer, and all that change. And for people who do art, you will be able, if you get lucky and are able to break from that amateurish level of art to the pro level of art, you will find exactly the same. You will see the resistance, you will deal with the resistance, but you will do it anyway. And again, it was the first book of that kind. He has, after that, published two more books. 2011, he published one called Turning Pro. Then he did one called Do the Work, all in the same lines. Okay, and his message has been grabbed for at least 2 or 3 authors. One of them was Seth Godin, who took the term resistance and tried to make a distinction out of the world of art. Because when you read Pressfield's book, he obviously canalized his book to the art, to the writing, to being an artist. And the reality is resistance applies to everybody who is doing something great, because even that it's not necessarily conveyed that way on the book, when you are an entrepreneur, you are an artist. When you are a solopreneur, you are an artist. When you are an intrapreneur, you are an artist, even if you don't recognize yourself as such. If you are any of these things, you are doing art through business. You are bringing something that is unique, something that is new, something that do not exist, or you are doing it in a way that haven't been done before. You will find all this, and you will deal with all this. The people who listen to our show and who read productivity and who are in the quest for being more productive, to lead a better life, in a way, the art of productivity, and the people who is playing there are artists. They are trying to do something different, something better, and in a different way. And they will fight with resistance, and they will do it. And if not, think about the following. When you begin your journey on the productivity world, that resistance, came to you and fight it. If you were a GTDer, the first weeks the collection was difficult, and then finally you conquer collection. But then it was processing, and then it was the weekly review, and every other thing. Every time you fail on those, it was the resistance. You didn't fail, the weekly review because you say, oh, this is not important. No, you knew it was important. You knew it was helpful. But what happened? Well, your brain started telling you, oh, you don't have the time. Oh, you are so busy. Oh, how you are going to waste 2 hours of your time. Oh, you fill in the blank. And that is resistance. Resistance is on everything, because at the end of the day, Doesn't matter what you do. Doesn't matter if you're a business owner. Doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur. Doesn't matter if you're an intrapreneur. Doesn't matter if you're an accountant or a lawyer. What you do on the day to day, if you are good at it, you are doing art. As you are doing art, you are going to need to fight with that difficult challenge of your own mind telling you that what you are doing is not worth it, and that what you are doing, why you are wasting your time, and why you are not doing something else.
I think it's really interesting for us all to take heart to the fact that being productive requires a certain level of friction. That is, there's an appropriate amount of friction that's necessary for us to be able to make progress. And that comes into account, and this is more psychologically, but the reality is that if you take the analogy of the wheels on your car won't go, won't take traction and won't be able to move forward on the street. The same thing applies when it comes to productivity, personal productivity, in the sense that, if we don't have enough of a challenge, then the mind is numbed to what needs to be done, and therefore it sees no reason to do it. So it needs to reach a threshold. It needs to reach this level of, what we're doing. And as it relates to creative output, I think you're correct, Augusto. There's a wide range of things that are creative output that we don't necessarily categorize as such, but I generalize because it just makes sense, right? So creative output for me is just the brain doing pattern recognition. It's creating connections among things that seem disparate. They seem disconnected from one another. And when we make those connections, that is either problem solving or creativity. You decide on the semantics of it, but that's really what it is. And so I think what Pressfield does, and this idea of resistance within creativity, is that we're able to recognize the things that both start us and excite us, like passion, interest, and those things that try to stop us, this universal force that Pressfield talks about that attempts to keep us where we are, from things not changing. And from my perspective, change is inevitable, right? You're going to age whether or not you like it, or no matter how much Botox or Restylane injection or or other kinds of cosmetic surgery you do, right? You're going to age. And that's just what it is. Time is going to go forward. What you do with that time is very different. And I think that's the real power of resistance here, is that it can be a truly motivating force. And I think there's some good constructive criticism out there of Pressfield's concept there. I know that the psychologist Frederick Heide, he has some sort of constructive criticism regarding Pressfield. But I think no matter how you look at it, whether or not you look at it as something that's agonistic versus something that can be motivating, right? I think that we should look at this as something that could be useful in productivity and personal productivity, that we can actually harness this energy, whatever this energy is. And Augusto, do you see it as since Pressfield sort of analogizes it to this quote unquote universal force, do you see it as an energy that's manipulable?
I see it more as something who suck the energy more than the manipulate energy. It takes the energy out of you. So if we go to the analogy of a vehicle, okay, imagine you come and take the cable out of the spark plugs. Okay, if you do that, I don't care how in good shape your vehicle is. I don't care how far you want to drive. I don't care how much gas you put on the vehicle. If the cable is not connected to the spark plugs, you're not going there. And that's what resistance does. Resistance tells you, why do you need this cable? Oh, you don't need this cable. Take it out. Who cares? And it robs the energy of what you want to do. And it takes, Pressfield said on The War of Art, says, resistance has no strength of its own. Every ounce of use it possesses comes from us. We feed it with our power and our fear of it. Master the fear, and you will conquer resistance. And And the reality is that when you are able to identify, the problem with resistance is the resistance is like a con artist. You don't know you're dealing with resistance until you know. And I wish to tell you, oh, there is a magic formula that I can give you. You follow 1, 2, and 3 and discover resistance. But resistance as a good con artist is really tricky. But in my experience, when you identify that your arguments and your excuses are resistance, immediately, as soon as you call it what it is, your relationship with that feeling change, and that throbbing of energy disappear. It is a really fascinating phenomenon that I wish could be explained better than in the way I just did. But is as soon as you are dealing with this fear, and then finally you notice, oh, I'm just dealing with resistance. As soon as you call it what it is, it loses all his power. So because of that, no, I don't think it's an energy as much as I think is something that robs or steals or all your energies.
So I'd like to move us in the direction of the applicable, the application, the practical, and talk a little bit about how resistance works in our own lives, in our own productivity, sort of systems and tools, or how it might work against them, psychologically, and how we cope with them, and maybe some tools that we can use to get out of that space. How to recognize it sooner, creating awareness, which is really important, and then of course how to utilize this new knowledge, right? If resistance is new to you, this Pressfieldian concept is new to you, how do you use the knowledge to create awareness and to combat it in essence? And in my world, I'm going to say harness it. I think that there's a real motivational impetus for me when I talk about harnessing this resistance as energy. I see it from the flip side, Augusto. I see it as being something that is a force. It's sort of like a black hole, but just like a black hole sucks energy in, I'm able to use that dark matter force to slingshot myself away from it, if that makes any sense. To those of you who love astrophysics, this makes sense to you. But I really do believe that you can harness resistance for its positivity and for its positive behavior modification. So let's talk about this in the more ground level stuff.
If we go back to the world of art, Pressfield lists 4 what he called the resistance greatest hits. Okay, and he said it's in no particular order, but he said pursuit of any calling in writing, painting, music, film, dance, or any creative art, however marginal or unconventional. If you are trying to do the same thing that other has done, probably resistance doesn't care, because resistance, the objective of resistance is to exterminate the extraordinary. He said also, the launching of any entrepreneurial venture or enterprise, for profit or otherwise, any diet or health regime, any program of a spiritual advancement. And, when you go to, if you pick diet as an example, most people has dealt with resistance. Most people has come into a diet program and failed. And you don't fail because you cannot do it. You fail because that internal talking told you, oh, well, you have been really good for 4 days. You really deserve that ice cream. You have been really well over this weekend. Tomorrow at lunch you should get that 2 little Coke. Okay. Oh, you should. You have really worked hard into losing the pounds. Why you don't eat that carrot cake? That's resistance. Nothing else. In his most pure and simple form.
Watch it. That carrot cake is totally on the table.
It is. It's the problem. And again, if you go back to the book, he said resistance is the most toxic force in the planet. And the problem is cannot be seen, touched, heard, or smelled, but it can be felt. We experience it as an energy field radiating from a working potential It is a repelling force. It's aimed to shove us away, distract us, prevent us from doing our work. Resistance is a self-generated and self-perpetuated. And the reality is the enemy within. Anybody who has ever tried to do an extraordinary project, a project, unconventional project, a really cool project, has dealt with resistance. They may know it, they may not know it, they may not even know how to call it. But the reality is nobody is exempt. And again, what made Pressfield cool was he wasn't trying to say, I am exempt. To this day, he told you that he dealt, on you read his blog and you read his things, and he openly said, I deal with this stuff every day. I need to come fight resistance every day. Resistance is not something for the people who, I'm feeling the fear because I have not made it. I'm feeling the fear because I'm not there. No, you're talking with a guy that by any measure of the imagination has been incredibly successful. Okay? And he continued to deal with it. Anything that you believe on that you are not doing, and that you are not doing because you are afraid of, and you are not doing because you are allowing the fear to win, and you are not doing because you are allowing your mind and the speech on your mind to come front and not allowing you to do it or stop you and distract you to do it, is resistance. When you have the project that you know is amazing, okay, but you are allowing perfectionism or you are allowing fear, what if people don't like it? That is resistance in its pure way. It doesn't matter your level of success. It doesn't matter your level of work. It doesn't matter what kind of work you do. Hey, you may conquer resistance on area A of your life, and you will find it hugely on area B and C. Because, again, resistance is a con artist. And not only that, is a really, really good con artist. And when you discover a way to fight it, she will come with 2 or 3 different ways for you not to identify. So it's not a battle that you will win once and let it go. It's a battle that in order to win, you need to fight daily.
Yes, a couple of things I wanted to point out for folks who are listening and want to be able to overcome resistance in some sort of in some practical terms. There are a couple of things. I really enjoy the work of Dr. John C. Norcross. As some of you know, I run Productivity Book Group, the virtual reading group. We discussed his book, Changeology, maybe 2015, and the book is called Changeology: 5 Steps to Realizing Your Goals and Resolutions. And Dr. Norcross's research comes on the heels of, I think, 20-something odd years of research into, goal development, goal implementation or goal achievement, and habit development. This is all research-based work, and he talks about this method of being able to change. He uses sort of a 90-day model for being able to do it. Who knows if that's sort of the right amount of time for every, change, but being able to overcome resistance in this way, I think, is really important. I'll put links to all of these in the show notes so that you can sort of check out our book discussion, but also the Changeology book website, because it goes over this process a little bit more closely and has some self-assessment and some self-change exercises. One of the things that he posits is something typically called a decisional balance sheet, where you basically use a multiple column format to be able to decide whether or not it's worth moving forward on something, whether continuing something or cessation of something. So you're capable of dealing with that, and especially for dealing with ambivalence. It's something that I've struggled with quite often, is this idea of sitting in a situation and being ambivalent about the task at hand, because the motivation's there, right? I know I can go up horizons in sort of GTD lingo. I know that I can go up horizons and say, yes, this is attached to this project. Yes, this is attached to this particular role or responsibility or where I'm accountable. Yes, it's attached to this short-term or long-term goal. And yes, it's attached to this other higher purpose, mission, vision. But I still don't want to do it. It's like, I don't want to call Bob. I just don't feel like it. Being able to very quickly in your mind's eye do the mental algorithm that's outlined here can be very, very powerful. And it's very simple. It's basically, what's the pro and con of changing for yourself and others? And you could take this to many different examples. Whether or not you want to start writing that email. Okay, what are the pros and cons of that? And what are the pros and cons of changing for yourself and for others? And so you just really quickly create that sort of 4-cell table in your mind. And you can do this on paper, you can do this in an Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheets, but just very, very quickly, writing those things down. One, I think anything that gets you moving, making action, is powerful for creating further momentum for productive output. But the other side is the ability to be able to get these thoughts out of your mind so that you can see them in a more rational, logical perspective. Because what we're really talking about is your emotions wrenching control over you. And in order to be able to sort of step back, and this comes from the work of Dr. Daniel Goleman. Most people know him from Emotional Intelligence, but he's also written this fantastic book called Focus, The Hidden Driver of Excellence. He talks about this ability to be able to do what's called productive reflection, as opposed to fruitless rumination. Ruminating is just going over the same thoughts over and over again, no productive output. But productive reflection is that thing we do when we actually resolve problems, when we become creative. And I think Dr. Norcross's method of being able to sort of look at these things in a little bit more of a logical, rational perspective in sometimes visual format can be very, very helpful. So just keep that in mind as you're moving forward with things, is being able to do this. There's also the concept of a decision matrix, and I'll put a link to one that I've used called the Pew Decision Matrix, and PUGH for those of you Googling at home right now. And the idea is for you to be able to use this scoring system in order to be able to make decisions. And this can be very powerful with larger projects. I don't think you should expect to do these with the call Bob example, but definitely with when you're trying to make larger decisions, this could be very, very powerful in being able to get you to decide whether or not to move forward on the first milestone to a project, or whether to delay that, or whether to start the project at all. This project really going to provide the benefits all told. We've talked about resistance, we've talked about Pressfield, we've talked about some of the good and bad side of utilizing this material and some practical tools. Anything else that we've missed?
When I read The Word of Art the first time, and I will guess was around 2004, or maybe close to 2004, I thought for years that, to me, because it applied to my world of writing. And it took me a really long time to understand that resistance apply to anything you are doing that is worth something. Yeah, if you're just cranking widgets and you don't care for creativity and you don't care for be outstanding and you don't care to be different, yeah, you probably don't have resistance. Or that's what you think. Actually, you are suffering under the umbrella of resistance if you believe you cannot do any of those, more outstanding, extraordinary things. But fine, if you don't want to aim for that at the end of the day is your call. But if you're trying to do anything that is worthwhile, anything, you are going to find resistance. You are going to need to fight resistance. And the only way to get somewhere is through. There is no muse, there is no inspiration, there is nothing that will come that will help you not to get or not to fight against resistance. And there is a couple of quotes from Pressfield that I try to put in front of myself often enough. And one of them says, resistance will tell you anything to keep you from doing your work. And you may be conscious of it, you may be unconscious of it, but every time you are not putting the work and you are postponing the work, regardless what that is, regardless if it's writing the answer to the judge regarding if it's published in the blog post, regarding what it is. What you are allowing is resistance to win. And on that same line, then I would like to at least close what I have to say with another quote of Pressfield. And he says, "Be too dumb to quit and too stubborn to back off." And that, so far, is the only recipe I have found to beat resistance with some kind of success.
I think that nicely wraps up this episode of ProductivityCast then. And so thank you so much for listening. If you have thoughts in terms of how you tackle resistance, how you overcome it, potentially harness resistance in order to be able to be more productive, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to hop on over to productivitycast.net. You can record a response, or you can just go ahead and comment on the episode in the comment section and below the episode, and let us know. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know what types of resistance you have come into contact with and what kinds of tools and approaches you've taken in order to be more productive in the face of resistance. So with that, we're signing off for this episode of ProductivityCast, the weekly show about all things personal productivity. I'm Ray Sidney Smith.
I am Augusto Pinot.
And here's to your productive life.
That's it for this episode of ProductivityCast, the weekly show about all things productivity, with your hosts, Ray Sidney Smith and Augusto Pinot.